Victor, a smooth-talking con artist, stands in the center of the courtroom, his wrists shackled, his tailored suit, now exchanged for a dull orange jumpsuit. Yet despite his circumstances, he carries himself with the same arrogant confidence that made him infamous for years. He ran elaborate scams, preying on the elderly, the desperate, and the trusting. He lived in penthouses, drove luxury cars, traveled the world while his victims lost everything. Some were left homeless, others drowned in debt. A few even took their own lives, unable to recover from the ruin he left behind. But none of it seemed to faze Victor as he stood before the judge, his lips curled into a smirk. The courtroom is packed, every seat filled with victims, reporters, and curious onlookers. Everyone wants to see the downfall of the man who once thought himself untouchable. The tension in the air is thick. Murmurs ripple through the crowd as the judge enters, an imposing figure with piercing eyes that have seen decades of criminals come and go. She takes her seat and scans the room before locking eyes with Victor. Mr. Sinclair, you have been found guilty of multiple counts of fraud, grand larceny, and identity theft. Do you have anything to say before I deliver your sentence? Her voice is cold, firm, demanding, yet Victor simply shrugs, his smirk widening. Your Honor, he says, tilting his head slightly, I think we both know this whole thing is a joke. His voice drips with amusement. The audience gasps in shock. His attorney tenses, gripping his briefcase so tightly his knuckles turn white. He had warned Victor to show remorse, to at least pretend to regret his actions, but the con man had refused. A joke, the judge repeats, raising an eyebrow. Victor leans forward, resting his cuffed hands on the defendant's table. Come on, 25 years for a little financial creativity. That's excessive, don't you think? He chuckles as if he's having a casual conversation over drinks. Besides, let's be honest, I'll be out in 5 years tops. Good behavior, maybe even 3 if I charm the right people. The courtroom erupts. Victims shout in outrage. One elderly woman with tears in her eyes grips the edge of her seat as if restraining herself from lunging at him. A man in the back shouts that Victor ruined his family, yet Victor remains unfazed, basking in the chaos like it's a show meant for his entertainment. The judge watches him carefully, her face unreadable. Then she picks up a file, flipping through pages before setting it down. Mrs. Sinclair, I have presided over many cases in my years on this bench. I have seen murderers show more remorse than you, she says, her voice even but filled with something dangerous. You sit here, laughing at the lives you have destroyed, showing no guilt, no understanding of the pain you have caused. She leans forward slightly, her eyes locking onto his. And that is exactly why I am going to make sure you never have the chance to hurt another soul again. For the first time, Victor's smirk falters, the certainty in the judge's voice. The finality of her words makes something cold creep up his spine, but he quickly recovers, flashing her a grin. Oh, come on, Judge, he says with mock offense. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of monster. I'm just a businessman, a very good one at that. The system let me do what I did. I just played the game better than everyone else, and they're mad about it. He gestures toward the victims like they are nothing more than sore losers, and that's not my problem. The judge exhales slowly, her fingers tapping against her desk. Very well, she says, her voice now icy. If you think this is a game, Mr. Sinclair, then let's play. I hope you are prepared, because this is one game you are going to lose. The prosecutor stands tall, her voice sharp and unwavering as she begins to outline the sheer scale of Victor's crimes. The courtroom falls silent, every word she speaks slicing through the air like a knife. She starts with the numbers: millions of dollars stolen from hardworking people, people who trusted him, who believed his lies. She describes how Victor crafted his scams with chilling precision, targeting those who could least afford to lose everything, and while his victims were drowning in financial ruin, he was living like a king. The first victim she introduces is an elderly couple married for over 50 years. Their dream was to retire in peace, travel the country in an RV, and spend their golden years together. But Victor took that dream and crushed it. He convinced them to invest their life savings in a fake real estate project, promising huge returns. Instead, he drained their bank account and disappeared, leaving them bankrupt and homeless. The wife had to take a job cleaning offices at night, while her husband, now frail and sick, struggles just to afford his medication. Victor leans back in his chair, his arms crossed, that smug grin still plastered on his face. The judge watches him closely, her face hard as stone. But the prosecutor is not finished. She moves on to the next victim, a single mother of three who trusted Victor with her savings, hoping to secure a better future for her children. Instead, she lost every penny. Her home went into foreclosure, her children were forced to leave their schools, and the stress pushed her to the brink of a breakdown. She is in the gallery, now eyes red from crying, her hands trembling as she glares at the man who destroyed her life. Still, Victor shows no remorse. He glances at her, then rolls his eyes as if her pain is nothing more than an inconvenience. The gallery erupts with murmurs, anger rippling through the room. But the judge lifts her hand for silence. The prosecutor presses on, her voice growing heavier with each story. And then there is the young man, barely 25, full of dreams of starting his own business. He took out a loan and handed it over to Victor, trusting the promises of a quick return. But when the truth came out, when he realized he had been scammed, the shame and the debt became too much to bear. He took his own life. His mother is here today, sitting quietly in the back, clutching a photograph of her son, her face pale and hollow, her loss so deep it seems to weigh down the very air around her. For the first time, a flicker of something crosses Victor's face. But it is not regret, it is annoyance, as if the tragic stories are nothing more than a delay to his day. The prosecutor narrows her eyes, her voice turning colder. Your Honor, this man did not just steal money, he stole lives, dreams, futures. The damage he caused cannot be undone, and yet he sits here today laughing as if it is all a joke. She turns to Victor, her gaze piercing. He believes he is untouchable, that he is above the law. But I am asking this court to prove him wrong. She lifts a thick file and holds it up. We have the evidence, the paper trails, the testimonies, everything to show the deliberate cruelty of his actions. He is not some misunderstood businessman, he is a predator, and he must face the consequences. The judge leans back in her chair, her expression unreadable. But the tension in the room is palpable. The victims wait, holding their breath, as the prosecutor delivers her final blow. I ask this court to impose the maximum sentence. No leniency, no mercy. Anything less would be an insult to the lives he destroyed and would send the message that people like Mr. Sinclair can laugh their way out of justice. The room falls into a heavy silence. All eyes turn to Victor. But instead of fear, instead of guilt, he does something no one expects. He chuckles low and mocking, shaking his head as if he cannot believe any of it. His arrogance hangs thick in the air, and for the first time the judge's expression darkens, a spark of something fierce flashing in her eyes. The judge's gaze sharpens as she watches Victor laugh. The sound is cold and cruel, echoing through the courtroom like a slap in the face to every person he has harmed. The gallery murmurs with disbelief. Victims shake their heads, some with tears in their eyes, others clenching their fists in silent fury. But Victor seems to relish the attention, leaning back in his chair as if he owns the room. His lawyer, visibly sweating, tries to pull him back to reality, whispering urgently in his ear, but Victor waves him off like an annoying fly. Your Honor, he says, his voice dripping with mockery, let's not pretend I'm the only one who plays the game. This is just business, and I happen to be better at it than most people. His words hang in the air, thick with arrogance, his smile widening as if he's daring the judge to prove him wrong. I mean, come on, locking me away won't change anything. These people should be thanking me for teaching them a valuable lesson. Don't trust strangers with your money. The courtroom erupts in outrage, voices rising as victims shout their fury. An older man in the front row stands, his face red with anger and his voice shaking. My wife died because of you, he cries. We lost everything because we trusted you, and you're sitting there laughing like it's funny. Victor just shrugs, unfazed by the pain in the man's voice. His laughter comes again, louder this time, as if he is enjoying every moment of their suffering. His lawyer buries his face in his hands, knowing that whatever slim chance they had of leniency is slipping through their fingers. But Victor doesn't care. He's always believed he is smarter than everyone else, and that belief blinds him to the storm brewing in front of him. The judge taps her gavel once, the sharp sound cutting through the noise and restoring silence. Her face is calm, but there is a fire in her eyes that no one can miss. Mrs. Sinclair, she says, her voice low and cold. You seem to find all of this amusing, but let me be perfectly clear, I do not. The gravity in her tone finally makes Victor pause. The smile falters for a brief second, but then he laughs again, shaking his head. Oh, come on, Judge, he says, like I'm supposed to be scared of a little prison time. 3 years, maybe 5 with good behavior. I'll be back in the world while these people are still crying over spilled milk. He gestures toward the gallery with a casual flick of his hand, as if their pain is nothing more than a joke to him. The judge's expression does not change, but those who know her understand the danger behind her silence. When she speaks again, her voice is like ice. Mrs. Sinclair, your arrogance is astounding, but it will not serve you here today. You sit there mocking these people. After destroying their lives, you act as if you are above the law. But I am here to remind you that you are not. She leans forward slightly, her gaze locked onto his, and trust me when I say you are about to learn that lesson the hard way. Victor raises an eyebrow, still smirking his confidence, unshaken by her words. Your Honor, with all due respect, you can't stop me. People like me always find a way, he says, his voice smooth and cocky. And if you think a prison sentence will break me, you're more naive than these poor fools who believed in my investments. The judge lets his words hang in the air for a long, heavy moment. Then she picks up the sentencing report, her face as unreadable as stone. Very well, Mrs. Sinclair, since you think you are untouchable, let me show you just how wrong you are, she says, her voice as sharp as a blade. I will make certain you understand the consequences of your actions, and when I am finished, there will be no laughter left in you. The courtroom is silent now, the air thick with anticipation as everyone waits for the moment when karma will finally strike. The judge's eyes never leave Victor as she holds the sentencing report in her hands. The tension in the courtroom is suffocating. No one moves, no one breathes. Everyone is waiting to see how far she will go. Victor still leans back in his chair, that arrogant smirk on his face, like he already knows the outcome. In his mind, he has won because no matter what happens, he believes the system cannot break him. He has spent years bending rules, twisting people to his will and escaping consequences, and today he expects nothing different. Mrs. Sinclair, the judge begins, her voice smooth but laced with iron, your repeated lack of remorse and your blatant disrespect for this court have only confirmed what I already suspected. You are a danger to society, and you have no regard for the harm you have caused these people. Her fingers tap the edge of the report once, twice before she sets it down. There will be no leniency in this sentencing. For the first time, Victor's smirk fades just slightly. His jaw tightens for a brief second, but he quickly recovers, adjusting his posture as if the judge's words are nothing more than noise in the background. The sentence of this court is as follows, she continues in a tone that would freeze stone. For the crimes of fraud, grand larceny, and identity theft, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in a maximum security prison with no possibility of parole. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. The gallery erupts, gasps and murmurs ripple through the crowd as the victims clutch each other, some of them crying tears of relief, others nodding in grim satisfaction. But it is Victor who sits frozen, the blood draining from his face. Wait a minute, he says, leaning forward, that smile nowhere to be seen. Now you can't be serious, he laughs, but it is not the same arrogant sound as before. This one is hollow, forced. No one gets 25 years for a white-collar crime. That's ridiculous. You can't do this. The judge does not flinch. I assure you, Mrs. Sinclair, I can. And I have, she says calmly, and I have not finished yet. Victor's hands clench into fists, his calm facade slipping with every second. The judge lifts another document and continues, in addition to your prison sentence, this court orders the immediate seizure of all your known assets. Every penny you have stolen will be liquidated and distributed to your victims. You will leave this courtroom today with nothing. The life you built on the backs of these innocent people is over. Victor's mouth falls open, his breath quickens, and for the first time in his life, he is speechless. His lawyer tries to speak, tries to argue for a reduced sentence, but the judge silences him with a glance. I am finished with arguments, counselor. This matter is decided, she says firmly. I have heard enough. The guards step forward, their heavy boots echoing through the silent courtroom as they approach Victor, who still sits there frozen, as if his brain cannot process what just happened. When one of the guards grips his arm, he jerks back, snarling, "Get your hands off me! I'm not done here. This isn't over, you hear me? This is a joke. This is a joke." But no one is laughing anymore, not even Victor, as the guards pull him to his feet. His composure shatters. He struggles against the cuffs, his voice rising in desperation. "You can't take everything from me. You can't do this." The judge watches impassively as he is dragged toward the exit, the last shred of his arrogance crumbling before everyone's eyes. "You did this to yourself, Mrs. Sinclair," she says quietly, her words calm but unyielding. The courtroom door swings open, and the moment Victor is pulled through, it slams shut behind him, leaving nothing but silence in his wake. In the gallery, a woman who lost her home clutches her husband's hand, tears streaming down her face as she whispers, "It's over, finally over." For the first time in years, the victims feel something they thought was lost forever: justice. The courtroom buzzes with quiet disbelief. Even after Victor is dragged away, the weight of his downfall hangs heavy in the air. For years, he played the system, twisted the law, and laughed in the faces of those he hurt. But now the game is over, and the consequences are real. The victims sit in stunned silence, some wiping away tears, others clutching their loved ones, as the reality of justice finally settling in. The judge remains seated, her expression calm and unreadable, but there is a sense of finality in her posture, as if she knows this moment will be remembered for a long time. In the front row, the elderly couple who lost everything hold hands tightly. The wife leans against her husband, her frail shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. After years of fear and uncertainty, the man who destroyed their lives is finally paying the price. Her husband gently kisses her forehead, whispering, "It's done. We made it through." He squeezes her hand, a promise that they will rebuild no matter how long it takes. A few rows back, the single mother who nearly lost her home stares at the empty defendant's table, her hands trembling as she thinks of the nights she cried herself to sleep, wondering how she would feed her children. Now, for the first time, she feels like she can breathe again. A small smile touches her lips as she imagines telling her kids that the man who took everything from them can never hurt anyone again. The judge taps her gavel once, the sound cutting through the murmurs, bringing the room back to order. "Before we conclude these proceedings," she says, her voice steady, "I want to acknowledge the bravery of the victims who came forward. Your courage and determination have ensured that Mrs. Sinclair faces the consequences of his actions. No amount of punishment can undo the harm he caused, but I hope this verdict brings you some measure of peace and the chance to begin again." Her words hang in the air, heavy with meaning. As the courtroom begins to empty, reporters rush to capture reactions. Cameras flash as victims are asked how they feel about the outcome. The mood is a mix of relief and exhaustion. Years of pain and betrayal are not so easily erased, but knowing that Victor can no longer prey on anyone else brings a sense of closure. In a corner of the room, the prosecutor stands quietly watching the scene unfold. She had spent months building this case, tracking every dollar, every lie, every shattered life, and now seeing Victor finally face justice brings a rare sense of satisfaction. She knows the fight is not over. There are always more criminals who believe they are untouchable. But today the system worked. Today, a man who thought he could outsmart everyone learned a painful truth: no one is above the law. Outside the courthouse, the sky is overcast, but to the victims it feels brighter than it has in years. As the elderly couple steps outside, the husband breathes in deeply, the cool air filling his lungs. "We can start again," he says, his voice quiet but firm, "and this time no one can take that away from us." His wife nods, tears still glistening in her eyes, but there is strength behind them now. The single mother exits next, her head held high. She has fought too hard for too long to feel anything but pride. Today, she will go home and hug her children tighter than ever before, because today the nightmare is over. Meanwhile, deep inside the courthouse, Victor sits alone in a cold, windowless holding cell, the arrogance drained from his face. His hands still cuffed, he stares at the floor, replaying the judge's words over and over in his mind, the realization finally sinking in: He lost everything, no more luxury, no more freedom, no more easy escape from the consequences of his actions for the first time in his life. There is no one left to manipulate, no one left to fool, and no way out. Victor sits on the cold metal bench in the holding cell, his hands still cuffed, his mind racing. For years he believed he was untouchable, that no one could ever bring him down, but now the reality of his situation crushes him like a weight. He cannot escape 25 years in a maximum security prison, no parole, no loopholes, no more games. The life he built on lies and manipulation is gone, and for the first time the walls feel like they are closing in. He glances toward the heavy steel door, his jaw tightens as he tries to steady his breathing, but the silence is deafening. No more lawyers to spin his story, no more victims to exploit, and the worst part is he did this to himself. His own arrogance, his own need to mock the system led to this moment. The judge's voice still echoes in his ears, reminding him of every choice that brought him here. Somewhere down the hall, the sound of footsteps grows louder, the door swings open, and two guards enter, their expressions blank as they gesture for him to stand up. "Let's go, Sinclair," one of them says, his tone cold. "It's time to transfer." Victor forces a smirk onto his face, trying to cling to the last shred of his pride, as if the chains around his wrists mean nothing to him. But the guards are not fooled. They have seen men like him before, men who thought they could beat the system until reality broke them. As they march him through the corridors, the sound of the courthouse bells fades behind him. No more cameras, no more attention, just the steady rhythm of their footsteps against the concrete. His heart pounds harder with every step. For the first time in his life, he cannot talk his way out of this. There is no clever scheme, no hidden escape plan, nothing but the harsh truth that he is about to lose everything. When they reach the transport area, Victor spots a group of inmates already shackled and waiting for transfer. The smell of sweat and fear hangs heavy in the air, but no one speaks as he is led toward the prison van. He glares at the guards, trying to project the same confidence he always has, but inside, he feels something unfamiliar creeping in. Doubt. As they lock him into the van, the door slams shut, plunging him into darkness. The vehicle rumbles to life, and with a jolt they begin the long drive to the prison. Every mile takes him further from the life he knew, the luxury, the power, the freedom, all of it stripped away by the same system he thought he could control. He grits his teeth, refusing to let the fear show, but deep down he knows this is only the beginning. Hours later, when the van pulls into the towering gates of the maximum security prison, a chill runs down his spine. The walls stretch high, razor wire gleaming under the fading sunlight. This is not a place for smooth talkers or clever schemes. It is a place where men are broken, where power belongs to those willing to take it. As the doors open and he is led out into the yard, the noise hits him like a wave. Inmates shout from behind bars, some laughing, some watching with cold, empty eyes. Victor swallows hard for the first time, realizing that his silver tongue means nothing here. No one cares how smart he thinks he is, no one cares how much money he once had to them. He is just another body in a cage, and whatever power he thought he held is gone. As the guards march him inside, the heavy doors slam shut behind him with a finality that makes his stomach twist. This is his new reality. No penthouses, no luxury cars, no private jets, just cold concrete and steel. No more laughing, no more games, only the long, slow crawl of time. And for the first time in his life, Victor Sinclair feels something he never thought possible: regret.